Ladies and gentlemen, can I please have your attention? I've just been handed an urgent and horrifying news story. And I need all of you to stop what you're doing and listen.
Hey everybody, this is Bill Manning. This is Studio C41. I got the gang back here. We are here for our third episode with KEH Camera. We're going to be talking about 35 millimeter cameras. So we got a bunch of cameras here. I will probably not talk about the ones that I brought in, but primarily the cool cameras that KEH has brought in. But first, let's go around the table. Steven, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well. A little sleepy now, just kind of sitting here at the end of the day. But yeah, doing really well. Just got back from shooting that wedding up in Banff National Park in the Canadian Rockies last week, so I'm still shaking off some jet lag. But yeah, doing well.
Nice, man. How was it up there?
It was fantastic. It was we're dodging some rain a little bit, and which was actually really good because it cleared out a ton of smoke from the wildfires that we've been having up there. But then it also got down, below freezing some nights.
Did it really?
It was fantastic. And then to come back to, still like 87-degree weather here in Georgia was not ideal.
Did you still have those snow-capped mountains?
Actually, yeah, we got the first dusting of the year happen while we were up there.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
That's so messed up.
It was really cool.
Nice.
Wow. So, Kevin, man, how you doing, bud?
Staying busy. Been doing some music videos lately. Been gaffing on that. So that's been some late nights, getting home at like 5 in the morning, a 1 p.m. call, and it's been a little rough. So, but I'm good.
Yeah, but Kevin, you don't require actual sleep. You just kind of like plug in somewhere for a few hours.
Well,
and then go again.
I wish life was that simple for me. I would probably be more productive, but I'm like need 8 hours. I'm one of those type of people. Like if I slept 12 hours, I'd feel amazing. I'd feel like perfect, and I could go for like 20 hours straight.
Dude, I can't sleep more than 6 hours now.
Oh, man.
Really? I can't do it.
Bill, I don't think you ever sleep. I get like messages from you on Facebook like 2 in the morning about the podcast or something.
Oh, that's because my brain runs like 1,000,000 miles an hour. I'm thinking about all kinds of stuff and
I don't know.
the day job.
When it's time for me to go to sleep, I'm out. I'm done.
Oh, no, I just want to get my best. I lay down trying to relax. My brain's like, oh, yeah, here are all those things you didn't think about until just now.
Yeah. So,
the dream.
So, Mark, Brent, what are you guys up to? What have you been doing lately?
Right now, we're just getting ready to go into our busy season, so it's just
really
really preparing. So a lot of the time at the office right now, for me at least, is getting travel plans arranged, and so I know where I'm going to be. I'll have a rental car waiting for me when I get to wherever I'm going. So it's always a challenge. Nothing's worse than getting to an airport and realize I booked the car at the other airport.
Oh, jeez.
So it's been a lot of trying to stay up on that right now.
You do know there are people called assistants that can help you out with that kind of stuff, right?
I've heard of that before.
Brett, you were telling me you're heading, doing a buying event up in Vancouver soon?
Yes, so not this weekend, but next weekend I'll be in Vancouver for a buying event. We're going to do basically a camera show. There's still some of those around the country where you get a bunch of photographers together that want to sell their gear to each other. So we're going to be participating in that. And then the next day, which is going to be a Monday and a Tuesday, I'll be working in a camera store buying equipment at Bo Photo.
Nice.
Great. Very cool.
So, how about you, Mark? I know you gave us some pretty cool pamphlets here, so you're going to be pretty busy.
I am, yes. Doing in my new position with KEH Camera coming up, I'm going to be doing a lot of speaking and teaching engagements. So I've got a workshop in Buffalo, New York. We call the Silo City Photography Workshop. We'll be speaking at the Buffalo Niagara Falls Camera Club before that.
Oh, cool.
In 2 weekends, KEH Camera is sponsoring the Society for Photographic Education Southeastern Chapter Retreat outside of Asheville. So I'll be there with Justin Goldman. We're getting ready. We have a booth at Photo Plus in New York City, so we'll be there. The company will be there, and we'll be attending and meeting with different people. So, yeah, there are a lot of events coming up that'll, as Brent said, also in between this, it's our busiest time of the year for selling, but we're also buying too. So,
Sweet.
So people don't, if you've got equipment you want to get rid of, we're not too busy to talk to you. And Brent, don't you have a buying event at KEH coming up?
We do, yes, we do them from time to time there. So we're going to have basically once a quarter. We're doing them these days. So we're going to have a bunch of people come in and sell gear at the office. So if you're in town, stop on by.
Sweet.
People can always use extra money for the holidays and stuff.
Yeah,
so,
I think I've actually seen Bill at one of those events, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, with my flubbed up medium format digital, which it worked. It worked after we'll get into that later, but it was not broken. It was user error. So we got a lot of great news. So as you guys may have heard on episode 5.5, we had an interview with Bellamy Hunt, the Japan camera hunter. Man, that was an awesome interview. The guy, it's amazing that he's getting into the film business. I mean, it was really interesting to hear the challenges that he's facing. And what I found as well as just as surprising was just how Japan is in the film market, that it's still alive and well despite Fuji not film, killing films off still. So it was an awesome interview. If you guys haven't listened to it yet, I highly recommend listening to that episode. I learned a lot just talking to him.
I mean, anytime we get to sit around and talk smack about Fuji is a good time for me. So.
That's true. So, so we as he mentioned in the interview, he said there has been more and more good news in the film industry. There have been more and more films that are being announced, and we welcome that news. I mean, it seems like every week now there's some big announcement with some company that I personally have never heard of, or some company that used to make film or something like that coming out from the ashes, and it's really exciting times. And so Bellamy thinks that it's just going to keep getting better. So hopefully we'll keep the trend going and seeing new films show up. So we'll just start it off. What's really exciting is that Bellamy is now shipping out his Street Pan in 120. We have not seen it yet. Hopefully it comes in pretty soon, Brent.
I'll let you know as soon as we get our first shipment in.
So I can't wait to see it.
I just finally got my hands on some of the 35 millimeter of that, so I'm looking forward to giving that a go.
Nice.
But I was gonna say emulsive.org, if you guys have never checked out that site, just put out a comparison between the JCH Street Pan and the Berger Pancro 400.
Yeah,
and it's really a great side by side.
Awesome. I haven't had a chance to read it yet, so hopefully we'll dive into that one, and then we'll talk about it on the next episode.
It gets nice and nerdy and goes into how each handles the red sensitivity and cutting through haze and all that stuff that I just eat up. So
techie talk.
That's right.
So JCH Street Pan is not the only one that has come out to market. Cine Still 50D in 120 has come out into the market as well. So I just got mine. I think we all got ours at the same time.
Yeah. Yep. And I know if you're local here in the Atlanta area, Michael has a pretty big order that coming in next week, I want to say. So if you're in Atlanta, come up to Dunwoody Photo and grab some by the end of next week is when we'll have it in.
And if you're not in Georgia, then you can still call it in and you can ship it out to you, right?
That is true. But there's a lot of different options.
Okay, sweet. So I'm pretty excited about it. I mean, we did the meetup. I did shoot the 800T 120, and it was pretty interesting. We did have a conversation about the anti-halation backing on it, how it does present some interesting color shifts and fogging.
The lack of, because they remove it. It's the remjet layer on cine film. So
right.
That being gone means there's no anti-halation backing.
Yeah. So the same thing for the 50D. So I can't wait to see what kind of fun little fogging that you get going on that one. So we shall see. So I'm gonna shoot it hopefully I can this weekend, and report back to you guys on all that. So I think it'd be kind of cool to reach out to Cine Still and just try to get them on the show.
The Brothers Wright are really solid guys. I mean,
very nice. I mean, I've called before with questions and just talked to one of them. They're like, okay, so this is how our film works and this is what we do, and they were just very open to sharing, and just so that was clearly a very great company who's doing things for the right reasons.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to try to figure out if I can reach out to them, tweet them, or something like that. They do have a pretty good presence on social media. Usually, when I'm tagging them on something, they're usually commenting or liking it and stuff like that. So, hopefully, maybe I can reach out to them. We'll see. So what next do we have here? I don't know, Steven, do you want to take this one here?
What is
you were all over it.
As far as the Impossible project, no longer the project being concluded, that the Impossible has been accomplished. Oh, good grief. Yeah, so Polaroid Originals. This past Wednesday, about a week ago, the 13th, was Polaroid's 80th anniversary. And it just so happened they made a big announcement for it that the brand of the Impossible project was ending and basically being re-announced and introduced as Polaroid Originals. Earlier this year, the principal investor in the Impossible project actually bought the Polaroid brand.
Really?
So, and that was kind of just a big kind of, I don't know, it was a fantastic kind of turn of things. This little upstart company that bought a factory literally bought the factory in the Netherlands the night it was going to be destroyed.
Wow.
Like Doc Caps and his crew got it,
Yep.
a few hours before those machines would have been lost to history. So I've been following Impossible for years, and we should definitely talk more about it in length at some point, but it's always been near and dear to my heart, and it's kind of bittersweet to see that Impossible brand end, but really exciting to see Polaroid Originals. So that, for anybody who hasn't checked it out, it is film being made for the vintage and older style Polaroid integral film cameras. So like the One Step, the Sun 600, the SX70, anything that's that iconic, square photo with the white trim around it at the end. That film was being sold as the Impossible project. It is now Polaroid Originals, and it continues to be better than ever. And they've also introduced a new camera, the first new Polaroid camera to actually use the Polaroid style of film in over 10 years. It's come to market, the One Step 2. And that's designed for their I-type film, which is actually cheaper than their other makes of film. All the films they make have gone down in price, which is a very welcome change. But the I-type film is exciting because it doesn't have a battery built into it, unlike the other Polaroid film. It's made for cameras like the new One Step 2 that uses a rechargeable lithium battery.
That's cool.
So you get cheaper packs of film down to, I want to say it's $15.99 for a pack of film, where previously it was about $24 for a pack of film.
Jeez.
So it's definitely, I already pre-ordered one.
Nice.
And a few packs of that. So I'm really excited to give that a go. That's shipping out, I believe, mid-October. We'll definitely talk more about that, do a little bit of a review, and hopefully I've got a couple of connections to the guys at Impossible or Polaroid Originals. Maybe we can work at getting a Skype call into one of those gentlemen. Cool. But yeah, it's just super exciting. It's crazy cool to see a brand like that kind of coming back to what it originally was, kind of a company about innovation and about something tangible, physical, and not just kind of, the name Polaroid's been abused quite a bit as they've gone through a few different bankruptcies. So I think it's just a really, really welcome, wonderful change.
Yeah. I mean, I not to be too dramatic, but reading it was very inspiring for me. I'm the youngest one in the room here. I'm only 22. So when I was at film school, only a handful of years ago, all the professors just said the same thing. It's like, well, one day, sooner than later, we're going to wake up to the news that Kodak is dead and it closes doors and film is gone forever. And so when I first started shooting film and falling in love with it, I just told my friends and family, I was like, well, I've fallen in love with an 86-year-old woman. I'm at that point like 19, right? We'll have a few happy years together, but inevitably it'll be over sooner than later. And then now to be sitting here only a few years later to be talking about, the rebirth of Polaroid with a project that was, as so many people said, impossible, and so named so well.
And we'll just rip a Band-Aid off right now for anybody who's listening.
Yeah.
Polaroid Originals, I'm going to have a hard time not referring to them as Impossible Project for a while. But so Polaroid Originals, in reply to a comment on their Facebook page, said that they have no plans to make peel-apart film. They're still making their 8x10 film, which is assembled totally differently than the 4x5 and the 2 1/4 pack film. But they have, and there were kudos to them for just being open and upfront about the fact that they just aren't going to make it anytime in the foreseeable future. It's a totally different animal. It's a really big challenge. And even though I love some peel apart film, it was always Edwin Land, Polaroid's founders. It was he wanted to reduce waste. He wanted to reduce the components and make things easier. So for him, peel apart film was just kind of a stepping stone to get to the integral film that we have now.
Yeah.
So yeah, but there still might be hope for that for some other companies, but just not from Polaroid Originals right now.
Maybe Fujifilm? Nah.
Maybe, I don't know, Cat Labs, JP had talked about it at one point, and there were a few other things floating around, but I'm just going to go with being thankful right now about Polaroid Originals.
I agree. We shouldn't spoil it with our hopes and dreams for other ones. So, but Polaroid isn't the only one that has kind of come out of the ashes. Yashica kind of made some headlines, and people are kind of interested in seeing what's going to be happening with that one. They put out a video, and it had their very, very legendary Electra 35. And everybody's like, oh my gosh, Yashica's going to put out a new film camera. They're going to do one, because everybody's kind of waiting. I think there's this itch right now that a new film camera to come to market. And I think a lot of people's hopes were given up because now people are kind of debunking it, saying, oh, it's their smartphone lens that they just made and put it in the news a few months ago and stuff like that. It's going to be interesting. I don't know. Hopefully it would be cool to see them do something, bring something different to market.
Yeah, at the very least, it's shown the media blitz about it has shown that there's excitement and people have a desire for something, a new 35 millimeter being brought onto the scene.
Absolutely. So I'm not going to sit here and assume that I know what Yashica is going to be put out there. It could be a new camera. It could not. It could be the lens that they've already announced, but people are still, anxiously waiting. I'm just going to have my hopes and dreams really, really kept down to an absolute minimum on that one. So I just don't like being let down. So Yashica is not the only one that's making headlines. Kodak has made some headlines.
They've been making headlines all year, man.
Man, they have had a good year. But they are now responding on social media about people asking, hey, man, where the heck is Ektachrome? Where the heck is it? And they're now responding and saying that they're going to do a limited tester release at the last quarter of this year with a limited production release for Q1 of 2018.
Which, all year they were always saying that it was going to be at the end of 2017 before any film was out.
Right.
So, they're just following up to their original timeline.
Yeah. So, to make it very clear, it is the Super 8 film first. I didn't really check back in the notes as far as what was said about 35 millimeter, but I think that they do have plans in 2018 for 35 millimeter, but no mention about 120 yet. So
no, not yet. Yeah. And this was a thing that I want to say the photographer actually mentioned it because he did an article and then got a response back right away from Kodak Alaris, talking about how it's going to be a joint venture between Eastman and Alaris for the movie film and then for the still film. So, 35 millimeter slide film is definitely a big part of this. And I would assume only that they're going to be doing 35 millimeter motion picture film just because it's,
it's the same exact thing, just a bigger spool. So,
right.
Well, I guess the perfs are slightly different sizes, but we're getting to a nuance that few care about.
Well, that depends how you shoot it, as far as how many perfs that you're getting on a single
frame.
Well,
the physical size of motion picture film perfs are curved, whereas still is square, but
they're not entirely square. They're slightly curved too.
Your face is slightly curved too.
That's accurate.
So, but then again, that's not the only thing that Kodak has announced. They recently announced the Printomatic, which is really interesting because this is their instant print camera. So it looks like that they are really want to take a bite out of Fujifilm's Instax market, as well as Impossible Film. Or let's see, I'm doing it now too.
Instead of Polaroid
Originals.
Well, it's actually interesting because I was looking more about it after you shared this. It's really more akin to the Polaroid Snap, which is a camera that Polaroid has had out for a little while. That's the same kind of thing. It's a digital camera, but it's a printer built into it.
Interesting. So that's what the O Matic is essentially doing, is just printing it out onto, is it like an image?
Yeah, it's basically,
paper,
as far as I
image
can tell, it's going to be similar to what the Polaroid Snap has been doing. They've been, for a minute, using this, I don't know if it's still called zinc, but it was like a zero ink technology. It was essentially a little pack that was, I don't know if it was a dye sub or exactly what it was, but it was a small print pack, essentially, that went in the back of the camera.
Okay.
And then you would just take it and you could print it out right there.
Okay.
I don't know if the Printmatic's going to be just you take it and it prints it and you don't get to select it, but the Polaroid Snap is, it's kind of like the Instax Square in that it's a digital camera and you can select the image you want to print.
It'd be nice to see eventually a fully analog instant camera from them, but in the meantime, I mean, I was really torn. I was like, well, do I get the new Kodak instant or do I get the new? And I just decided I'm just going to get both. I'll solve that problem.
Honestly, I don't think that Kodak will ever make a instant film camera ever again because Polaroid sued the daylights out of them in the 70s.
Well,
Really?
yeah, okay.
Yeah,
That solves that problem.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, we also have one last new film announcement. Kosmo Foto Mono has put out a 100 speed 35 millimeter panchromatic black and white.
Formerly known as Zorky Photo.
Okay, that's what it was. All right, I felt like we did talk about this on a previous episode briefly.
Probably mentioned it as Zorky, but he just recently changed his name to Cosmo.
Oh, okay, all right. So that is the one that is at 100 speed. You can pull it to 50 if you wanted to, and can comfortably push up to 400 from what I've read. So it'll be interesting to see that one come out. The pre-orders are up now, and they are available. Pre-orders will be available October 1st, 2017 on Kosmo Foto. It's K-O-S-O. It's K-O...
KOSMOFOTO.com.
Thank you. There's too many O's.
Hey, it's all right.
And the price is £4 It is UK based, and I think there is a minimum of 10 that you have to order.
Yeah, and that's unfortunately some of the stuff shipping is a little bit of a pain. But there are some retailers like Freestyle Photo, for instance, out of California, just recently got the Rolly Variochrome. They just got that in stock. So that's going to make things a lot easier for anybody in the in North America who wants to get their hands on it. I can only imagine it's going to be a matter of time before things like the Japan Camera Hunter film, the Kosmo Foto, and other things kind of trickle to some more U.S. based distributors.
Yeah.
But if you want it now, order it from overseas.
Yes, and you can get the JCH Street Pan 400 from off of Bellamy's website, JapanCameraHunter.com. Everything is in yen. I'm not going to complain, but I mean, the price is kind of off-putting at first. You're going 11,000. Oh, yen. So, let me do a Google conversion, and it came out to like $11 or $12 or something like that. So it wasn't too bad, but. Anyway, so it's great to see that more and more 35 is coming back to market. There's this itch to see a new 35 millimeter camera come into the market. But honestly, what KEH has been bringing in, a lot of these cameras, even their marked bargain, look and feel brand new. I mean, honestly, it's just when we had that first medium format, Brent, when you brought it in, you said these are all bargain. My jaw literally hit the table. I couldn't believe it. That was absolutely amazing. So, I mean, honestly, if you got that 35 millimeter bug and you want to get into film, Brent's got a whole bunch of cameras here. They got a warranty and everything like that. Your purchase is going to be completely safe. You're not buying something and then going into like an as-is kind of situation. So, I mean, this is just absolutely amazing. I mean, some of these cameras were, made in the 1950s and they look brand spanking new. Like the plastic was just peeled off of them. It's amazing. So, what's the most common camera that you're commonly seeing that people are, saying, hey, I'm getting my first film camera, what's the one that you're commonly seeing that's kind of popping in?
Well, there's really not one exact one, and I'll be honest with you, a lot of it these days has to do this is what my parents had, this is what my dad had. So you have this thing where there's this connection with the family, and it's actually kind of exciting, to be honest with you, because there's nothing better than picking up a camera that you have actually pictures in your photo album that are taking of you, that you want to go out and actually buy that camera now and can find it. So there's not one exact one. It just really depends on what your preference is. It depends on, if you're a Canon, a Nikon, Leica, whatever type of shooter you are.
Do you guys still get a lot of students from like college, high school, even, going in and saying, my professor told me to get a manual 35 millimeter camera with a 50 millimeter lens. What do I get?
Well, yes, we have basically 2 or 3 times a year when we run out of our most popular manual focus basic cameras, and the big one that everybody goes after is usually the K1000, which has been just extremely popular. It's just a workhorse tank of a basic camera. I mean, you can't get any more basic. It's got a little match needle metering. It's incredibly simple, and then you have the incredible optics that Pentax offers, and they've just always been spot on.
Yeah, I mean, this camera here, the K1000, is in excellent condition. We're selling for $179.
Wow.
And the 28 millimeter lens is $65. I mean, how much less do you, I mean, to get into a basic 35 millimeter film camera to start learning, what better way to do that? I know that back in the 80s, when I was involved in an organization, we were teaching basic photography. We bought, I think, about 30 of these, and we had them, and that's what we used when people came to learn how to do their basic photography course.
And when that particular, the K1000 was made for something like 21 years?
From 1976 to 1997.
Yeah.
The longest running cameras ever made.
21 years.
Over 3 million units sold.
And there's been different versions of it.
Yeah.
That have
minor slight nuances.
Exactly. The last version they had was they started making everything a lot flimsier.
There's some plastic pieces. It was manufactured in China as opposed to the other 2 times where it wasn't. And it's my personal favorite 35 millimeter camera, even for the stuff I shoot. And obviously it's why it's promoted for students so much is it's just so simple. And if you read Ken Rockwell's review on it, he praises it like many things. But it just gets every bit of information that you don't need is stripped away. Like for students in my class that I teach, Southern Crescent Technical College in Griffin. So I require the students the school will provide. We have some, but they can also get their own. They have to shoot a K1000 with the 50 millimeter lens. And it's this thing where once they get past 1/25th of a second, what does that even do? Once they learn that, and sort, it becomes so easy to master shutter speed and aperture, and it's just everything else sort of just strips away. You don't need anything else.
There's nothing else there.
Yeah,
exactly.
These cameras it's tangible.
Yeah.
It's not like you're just flipping through like an LCD on a menu, which can be great even on like, the more recent, more modern, autofocus 35 millimeter SLRs. But these cameras, it's such a straightforward design. Your aperture's right there on the lens, your shutter speed's right on the top of the camera. And if you shoot one camera that's like that, you can pick up a camera that has that same design no matter what it is. Even something like, the Mamiya 7 here that Bill picked up recently. It's the same kind of design. Your shutter speed's on top, your aperture's on the dial, and it's simple and it's there because it works.
Yeah, and it gets out of your way unless you just focus on taking the image. And Jason Lee talks a lot about how photography for him and a lot of people is just this guttural process where you don't overthink it. And I think the K1000 for me does that because, there's no questions. Every time I go out and shoot with my RZ67, I mean, I love that camera. But sometimes the camera in of itself is like, okay, I gotta freaking fiddle with this, and I always forget the dark side. Without a fail, right? And eventually I'll get better about that. But the K1000 is it's just like it's like all you need and nothing more. And I think, yeah, absolutely, it's my recommendation for anyone who's like, I want to get into film. Kevin, what should I get? A roll of some 400 speed black and white film and a K1000 50 millimeter lens.
Well, and right along with this, I mean, my first 35 millimeter camera was a Minolta SRT 101. We have a 201 SRT 201 here, which is essentially right in the same class as the K1000. I mean, this camera here, the camera body is $41 we're selling it for, and the 45 millimeter lens is $49. So for under $100, you can get a basic workhorse 35 millimeter camera and lens.
Yeah, it's reliable and tough.
And then you can learn how to do film photography with, and it's got all the basic controls you need with a light meter built in, and that's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And which Minolta is that one?
This is a Minolta SRT 201. He also made a 101. So,
and I think the next sort of camera that's considered in that, like what camera should you get, is the AE1.
It's and that's my nice segue, Kevin.
Yeah,
that's my favorite 35 millimeter. It was my first SLR. I just had a lot of cheap point and shoots before that, and that was the camera that I think I really started to learn and fell in love with photography on.
Well, just to throw in, that's the Canon AE1.
Yeah, excuse me, the Canon AE1,
which again is in the same.
Yeah, same thing. Very similar price point. Very popular. For me, it was you're talking about your parents. My dad shot Pentax. He had a Spotmatic F, and he gave me his K1000, and so I was like naturally just, I'll shoot with that. And my only thing against the AE1 that I would prefer over the K1000, this is very minor, is it requires a battery for the frame to fire.
Yeah, that's true.
Whereas both of my K1000s, the meter is broken. I don't have batteries in there because of that, and also the film canners are broken. So mine are literally just boxes that advance film and hold the lens.
Nice.
I mean, it is.
Gee, what a concept! That's the whole basis of the camera, right?
Yeah, right.
That is the one hang up about the AE1 that I've definitely been the first shoot I was ever paid for to do photography on. I was shooting with my AE1, and I had never had my battery die before that time. I was on the shoot. I got through it, but I didn't realize it's got an electronic assist shutter. So it's mechanical, but electronics help fire it. So I kept having to slam the shutter button down harder and harder the entire shoot.
Oh my gosh.
Well, in some of these different models, different manufacturers that actually had electronic shutters, though many of them, and I don't know, Brent, the percentage, but if your battery went dead, you still had a mechanical shutter on it at a 60th or 90th of a second that you can continue to use. Obviously, it was set up to do flash also because it was synchronized for flash, but you could use it as a camera, just. And I think, one of the other things that when I was learning photography is that, we talk about the meters going out, is you started learning how to judge your exposure, not by what your light meter said, but I mean, basically, if you used 400 speed film and, there was a Sunny 16 rule and you took your shutter speed closest to your speed of your film, 400 to 1/500th of a second at f16 or F, I mean, so you knew what your exposures were.
It's funny. So I'm holding my Canon AE1, and there's actually a funny story behind this one. So I was going through some antique stores, and I saw this little Canon with a FD, what is this, a 50 millimeter 1.8, and I went to check to see if the shutter would advance, and it wasn't advancing, and I was like, well, they're asking like $40 for it. I was like. So I went up to the lady and I said, "Hey, look, I don't know if this thing even works. If anything, it'd look pretty cool on my shelf." And she was like, "Okay, well, $17." I said, "Deal." So I took it, and on the way out, I was already checking on Google to see what kind of battery it took. And I went over to Batteries Plus. They gave me the battery that I needed for it. Popped out the old one. Luckily, it was not corroded. I was really happy about that. Popped in the new one. Click. I was like, all right, I'm in business. So, but this one, again, this was a very lucky find. I think I still have some problems with it. I mean, you can kind of hear that the shutter's not all that great.
It's got that chirp. Oh, my AE1's got that same chirp on it too. And I love it. I know it's not, it means that it's having some issues, but I love that sound.
Now, I'd like to say it doesn't mean that it's having issues. It just means that it needs lubrication.
Okay, so it needs
these
lubrication.
things came from the factory like that. There's a special little oil thing that you can get that kind of is curved. You go up and drop it in, and it'll completely get rid of it. But
that's good.
Or somebody would tell you that because it came from the factory like that, it was actually the bird photography edition that it did. It had its own little chirp so that it wouldn't.
I like that spin, Mark. That's clever.
funny.
But
that's good to
I have
know.
an AE1 program that I actually got for a really good deal that I shoot a lot more now than my original AE1 because I need to get the battery door fixed on that. And there's just some things, but it doesn't chirp. And I always kind of miss that when I'm shooting it, is that it's nice and significantly more quiet.
It's funny when we're out in the field. That's we see a lot of AE1s. That's by far they sold more of that camera than any other manual focus camera that's out there. And 90% of the time, I'm sorry, that's wrong. It's probably about 98% of the time they're going to chirp. And when you get one that doesn't, it's like, oh, hang on a second, did I hear this right? And you got to fire it a couple times. Like, oh my God, this one doesn't chirp. This is crazy. So it's
That's funny.
for us, just because of the repair cost that goes into doing that, because you got to pay a tech. We have to charge kind of like a repair fee on it. It's minimal, but it gets rid of it.
Oh, that's good to know. I mean, I love the AE1, but the first 35 millimeter that I started shooting on was actually this Minolta X700.
Yeah, that's probably one of my favorite cameras.
You know, I found this in the bottom of my dad's closet, and I asked him, I was like, hey, can I have this camera? Because this is right when, I would say 2014, right when that film craze started to kind of pick back up. And I was like, can I? He was like, I don't even know if it works. So, yeah, if you get it to work, you can have it. And I'm like, sweet. And so did some quick research. Turned out that there's a battery on this one as well. And it's one of those little, I think it's the CR123.
It takes two 76s.
76s, that's what it is, that go on the bottom. And
That was impressive, Brent.
Hey, what can I say?
Maybe you should work in the camera industry.
I started looking into that.
All right, cool. Well, just an idea.
Yeah. It worked. And I mean, this thing is in awesome condition. I'm really happy. And I take this out when I'm doing, a little bit of street style photography, even though this isn't really for street photography, but the fact that it's so compact compared to like my D610 and everything, I actually prefer, throwing some JCH 400 on this.
And you know it. That's what the whole thing about like it
That's-
feeling good and right and compact
Exactly.
in your hand is that it's comfortable. Same thing for Kevin for that
Yeah.
that K1000 and me and the AE1.
Yeah, it's like an extension of yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
Just like any sort of bit of technology that anyone makes art in any field. I think when the machine gets out of your way and just lets you do your thing, that's when it's like, all right, that's the thing for me. That's my camera or my whatever it is.
But it's interesting with these cameras, we walk around with them so much, you start getting a bond with it. And I see it all the time trying to buy these cameras from people. There is such an emotional bond. And it's funny because certain people, you can almost read it. There's just like very apprehensive. They want to get rid of it because they know they're never going to use it again. Mm-hmm. But then again, they don't want to get rid of it because they've really traveled with it all over the world. So I told this one lady, and it was the funniest thing to me, and it made her feel so good. I was like, look, I'm going to find somebody that's going to love this camera as much as you do. And you could just see this relief come over her, like, oh my God, somebody else is going to really appreciate this.
Right.
It just made her day.
That's awesome. Yeah, I don't know if I'll get rid of this simply with the fact that it was my dad's. And then I've told the story several times before of my family friend that had passed away and left me a few cameras. He left me an old Kodak Retina 2A. So I love this little camera. It's a little tough because the viewfinder is so small, but after doing some reading on it, some people said, really, you want to zone focus with this and then just kind of eyeball it and shoot it with a deeper aperture. But I mean, this is really cool because this was like my first like leaf shutter camera. I mean, this is
So quiet.
it is. It's so weird having a compact camera that's a leaf shutter. So like, hold on a second. So I love that. That's so awesome. So and I'm so used to that sound now with the large format. To hear that on 35 millimeters, kind of messes with your head.
Really cool.
So I know, Brent, I love that you brought, there's cameras for sale here, but I don't know, there's something about 35 millimeter cameras and these older cameras and the attachment to them. And just the fact, like we've all been saying, this is a camera you walk around with. Larger format cameras, you spend a lot of time with them, you shoot a lot with them, but I don't know, when I go out, I have an AE1 in my bag. Brent, you've got an Olympus here that you said it's your personal, it's a little rangefinder camera, but you travel all the time with this guy.
Correct. Yeah, it's the Olympus 35RC. So it's just a real simple camera, very limited on shutter speeds. It has basically 6 different ones, 15, 30, 60, 125, 500th of a second, and bulb. So it's about as basic as you can get. Nice fast lens on it. It's portable. It's well built. It's going to take some punishment, but it's just fantastic. And it's got Olympus glass, which is, all these manufacturers do an incredible job with their glass. I mean, but it just does a fantastic job.
I think maybe we should explain what a difference between a rangefinder camera and a single lens reflex.
Sure, absolutely. I was before we touch on that though, Mark, I wanted to hear from you. Is there a 35 millimeter that's kind of been special to you? Or
I've got my own. I mean, for most of my career, I've used Leica. This is my personal Leica M4P that I purchased, I think, in 1982, and have done the majority of my work up until 2005 when I went completely digital. So this is a camera that I had with me all the time, and you can see by the back of it and the edges. I
love to see that brassing. That's beautiful.
It's just because
it's got character.
I mean, I had another M4P and I had an M6 as backup cameras, but this was, this one does not have a light meter in it. The P had, it's a rangefinder camera, so when you put a lens on, it automatically put in the rangefinder, the white lines that gave you what your actual view is going to be. I typically did almost 98% of my work with this camera and a 35 millimeter lens. That was it.
That's a beautiful camera.
Yeah. So Mark, you did. Yeah. Let's kind of delve into that briefly. I think about the difference between an SLR, which is a term that gets bandied around so much, and just kind of we don't even think about talking about what it is, versus a rangefinder or other types of cameras that aren't even rangefinders, that are just zone focus and just a viewfinder, or a point and shoot even is another type of 35 millimeter that we don't even have a point and shoot here, but it's just as viable. And when you think about today's terms, all of these cameras are full frame.
Correct.
In that they're all going to be that full 35 millimeter film frame image, which is what a full frame DSLR or digital camera is based on, is that size of an image field.
Although, just to throw in that there were some 35 millimeter half frame cameras.
That's exactly right.
That's right.
So they were even smaller, and they would do half of a 35 millimeter frame for each shot you did. Yeah.
And those cameras were so, like the Olympus pen. That's what they're fantastic glass. I mean, just really cool, but just totally strange, kind of different, awesome cameras. Like, I know Michael's got a few in his collection here at Dunwoody of some like the Yashica and a Canon, and everybody seemed to make a half frame camera for a minute, and all of them, their native orientations, a portrait. It's a vertical shot. So you're fitting those more frames on there. It's a really weird, strange, but awesome little thing. That's this great niche. And as far as I know, the pen was the most prolific of them and had the interchangeable lenses for some of the bodies too. Right. But I've been rambling a lot. But anyway, as far as those different formats or different styles of cameras, an SLR. So single lens reflex is what that stands for. So the problem with some cameras where you are actually looking through a separate viewfinder window is something called parallax error. It's where what you're seeing through your little viewfinder and what the lens is actually recording in the camera are slightly disconnected. And it gets worse and worse the closer you get to the camera, because you're increasing the distance basically between your focus and what you're viewing and what your camera is recording. And that happens in point and shoot cameras. It happens in rangefinder cameras. Yep. And an SLR, that actually uses a mirror and a prism. So what you are seeing through your viewfinder is the exact image that is coming through that lens. So when you put a different lens on your camera, when you get closer to your subject, you are not having that issue as far as that parallax error. It is going to be a pretty true view of what you're going to be capturing on there in that frame. Some SLRs have different, fields of view. They don't see the full frame in their viewfinder. But when you take that image, that mirror swings out of the way, and then it lets the light go through into the shutter, and it is recorded onto the film plane. And it's the same thing on a digital SLR today. Yeah. Same kind of technology of a mirror and a prism, and a mirror that flips out of the way.
So, but I mean, to throw in, there is parallax correction, although what you're paying for in some cameras like Leica, has taken care of that in their optical system, which is one of the reasons you pay more for it, as opposed to some of the other rangefinder cameras that are less expensive and don't do quite a perfect job as that. And I mean, as you pointed out in single lens reflexes, one of the things that would differentiate between a sort of a professional single lens reflex and sort of the amateur or semi-professional was really how much you saw in your viewfinder matched what your film was going to see.
Right.
So a higher end Nikon or Canon, you might be close to 100% of what you see is what you get, where in a medium range SLR, you only would get 95% of what you'd see. So you thought you had this thing perfectly aligned and framed, and then when you processed your film, there'd be a little bit more around the edge. And that's all the differences in terms of, why cameras cost more than others.
Yeah, for sure. And that's actually funny you mentioned that, because that was something I never really paid much attention to until I was shooting some slides for a project in school. Because if you're shooting print film, negative film, or even shooting on a DSLR that is, the viewfinder is slightly smaller than your whole image area, you don't think about it so much because you're cropping, you're composing your shot anyway. You're, in the darkroom, you might be cropping that frame. But then I had a professor looking at my slides being like, oh, well, this is there's this little bit that you didn't want in the image right here. I can tell. It was like, that's because your camera doesn't have a 100% field of view on it in the viewfinder. So it is just an interesting thing to consider.
Well, I think the big difference, though, is that a single lens reflex, like as you said, has this mirror and prism system. And when you make the exposure, the mirror has to flip up out of the way so that the shutter can open, exposure could be made, and then the shutter closes and the mirror flips down. Where in a rangefinder camera, there is no mirror.
So tell us about what a rangefinder is, Mark.
Well, it's, as you said, you've got an optical system up on top of the camera that is engineered to match the lens that you have on the front of it. And when you put the lens on, if I put this 50 millimeter lens on this Leica, as soon as I put it in, the 50 millimeter frame line comes up in the viewfinder, and that frame line is as accurate as I've ever seen. If I put a 35 millimeter on, it gets bigger. If I put a 75 millimeter lens on, it gets smaller, and uses the same focusing system. It's just the outline is different. But to me, the real difference, if we just cock these shutters, and then I'll be quiet. And here's a Nikon at a 60th of a second, a single lens reflex. And then we've got a Leica. That's a difference in sound.
It's a big difference right there.
And so when you're for me, and for a lot of people who are photographing people or people doing things, or people somewhere in that sound and doesn't interrupt what's going on. It doesn't call attention to itself. That sound does. And so, there was
sound on an SLR.
I'm sorry, as an SLR. Yeah. But there's even things where photographers that would be working either in, like, say, the Symphony Hall in Atlanta or at a play, right? You could only use a Leica there because they didn't want the sound of the camera, images being made during a performance, then be interrupting the customer's listening experience or viewing. Yeah. So those are, there's all different reasons why you pick one over another.
Well, and there's also size is an issue too. Typically rangefinders, because you don't have to have that mirror and prism assembly, are smaller. Like you have here, you've got your personal M4, but I'm so glad you guys brought this as a Leica CL. I've always wanted to actually get my hand on one of these because it's one of the most affordable Leica bodies. What do you say, Brent? You guys sell this one for...
It's like $460.
$460 for an actual Leica body.
That's correct.
It's a steal. And it uses all of the same M-mount lenses, so all of the full lineup of Leica. There's a Minolta M-mount lens on
here. They made
here.
a couple of lenses specifically for that.
But there's even M-mount, as far as the old Canon and Nikon M-mount lenses that can be used on a body like this.
Right, that's correct.
But this thing is so small and compact. It's about half the size of a Canon AE1. And it's got that same kind of, that same here's the shutter on this guy. Super quiet and discreet too. So that's something that I really like about rangefinders is the size.
Well, and then to me, the last thing is not only is the shutter quiet and you have less moving parts, right? And but with this mirror flipping up and down, there's a vibration that happens within the camera. So typically, handheld, you wouldn't use a single lens reflex under 60th of a second. With the Leica, it was very I would use a 30 or a 15th of a second all the time and make actually sharp images that I didn't have any motion in because I didn't have that vibration going on.
Gotcha. So you guys, actually, I couldn't think about it. I'm thinking if there is a couple now. But I was going to ask, so rangefinders are for the most part manual focus, where in SLRs you've got autofocus SLRs, which are very akin to the current DSLRs, the digital SLRs that are out there. You pick up, late iterations of a Canon or a Nikon. Like I've got a Canon EOS 1V. It looks almost identical to a Canon EOS digital SLR as far as the layout, the style, the autofocus, and everything on it. Even the way looking through the viewfinder looks like looking through my 5D. But on the rangefinder, for the most part, they're manual focus, except I want to say Contax's G series.
Oh, yeah. The G2 was very much like that. It was an autofocus rangefinder.
Yeah. But I remember on...
That just sort of brings up something. All these cameras we were talking about, the Pentax K1000, the Minolta X, they're all manual focus.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
The people listening to this are so used to having a digital DSLR that's autofocus. I mean, these cameras, it was a big deal having a light meter inside that you can actually see and in a line.
right.
These were so
or having some kind of auto exposure. I know,
that started coming on, right?
Like we mentioned we don't have one on the table, but the Yashico Electro 35 was, I think, the first 35 millimeter.
It was. That's what really separated it.
That had some auto exposure on it. Yeah. So, and then you had cameras like there were certain models that only did shutter priority, and certain ones that only did aperture priority. Like the AE1 was a shutter priority camera.
That's right.
And then the AE1 program, the big difference was that you had an automatic mode. You had program. But these viewfinders are so different on the cameras. If you've never picked up a manual focus SLR, it's a much brighter viewfinder than what you're used to on an autofocus camera. And you have this kind of, a lot of times, this kind of almost split field of view sometimes, or there's other different viewfinders that assist you in focusing and making sure that your subject's in focus. Now, on the other hand, on a rangefinder, you have that kind of dual.
It's two images come together as one, and you're in focus. But there's,
And aren't typically, and I'm pretty new to rangefinders, aren't typically the finders in general just brighter than you would see in SLR?
Yeah, because you're not looking through a lens. So you're just, you actually have an optical system that you're looking at exactly what it is you're looking. And I think for me, in the type of photography I did, and another difference is with a rangefinder, when you make an exposure, there's no blackout of the scene. So your single lens reflex, the mirror flips up, and the exposure is made, and when you actually make the exposure, you don't see exactly what you made.
Right.
With the rangefinder, when I click the shutter, there's no blackout. I'm looking through and I see exactly what it was that So again, for many of us, if our life started in film photography, we had no way of knowing what we had captured until the film was processed. Right. So you had to have the confidence, and the rangefinder gave you even more confidence because you saw exactly what it was when the exposure was made. But I was going to address something else.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
The other thing, when you got to the Nikon F3s and the Canon F series cameras, or whatever they call them, because I'm not that familiar with the Canon.
Well, there was like the Canon F1,
right,
and
F1.
Then the FTB, and then they moved up to their T series in the 80s. So,
but one of the things that, and I think back in the 70s, 80s, and even into the 90s, why Nikon was sort of the quote professional photographer's camera was because these prism finders could be changed. They made different prism finders with different light meter systems, but more importantly, on all the these F series, you could change the focusing screen.
Yeah,
they might have there was like 50 focusing screens, and so if you're doing imaging through a microscope, it required a different focusing screen than if you were doing something with a long telephoto lens, or you could have something with a grid on it. They had all kinds of things to assist you.
I remember seeing that there's like some waist level and like chimney finders you can get for these cameras for
There
35 millimeters. So it's so strange.
The amount of accessories that are out there, and for the the way they design these cameras to be used in so many different situations. I mean, you can adapt them to just about anything.
That's very cool.
Do you keep any of those in inventory yourselves?
Oh, certainly.
The
We certainly do.
That's awesome.
I was going to raise a point about rangefinders. So I've never been a rangefinder guy until probably because I've only used crappy rangefinders, really, when it comes down to it. Talked about, Kevin, you asked if rangefinders are typically brighter. I've seen some, like even picking up Bill's Retina here, it's a small, and it's possibly like dirty and fogged from age and everything too. Those rangefinders are so hard to focus and compose for me. And there are even some more recent cameras that just have really dim rangefinders that I've never liked. But then you pick up something like a Leica, or even like Bill's Mamiya 7, which is a medium format rangefinder, that they're so bright and clear, and it's so easy to focus, you can really tell a difference.
Well, what's really interesting too, because I was asking some questions on the Atlanta Film Photographers group as far as like focusing on it, because I got really frustrated because I kept getting to that point where, like, when I was first shooting manual, you know, I was kind of hunting, going past it, the focal point, and then coming back and everything. So I kind of posed the question as far as like some of the more experienced rangefinder shooters. And I said, set it all the way to infinity and then work your way back. And you'll get so used to that particular motion that, you know, you'll be able to hit it very quickly rather than, you know, hunting, you know. So everybody kind of has their own little system as far as focusing on rangefinders. But I find it kind of cool because now I can kind of like, I feel like I'm relearning something. You know, some people may find that frustrating and, you know, just want to get into a camera and just get right into it.
But I think what you're saying is something in my entire career. I mean, Leica's considered, you know, one of the cameras, and there are a lot of photographers who in their life say, I want to get a Leica rangefinder camera.
Right.
And I'd say that close to 70% of them buy a rangefinder, a Leica M series, and then within 6-8 months get rid of it because they don't, it's so different than using a single lens reflex. And it's strange in terms of focusing. And it sort of brings up another point, and some of the, when we're talking about these cameras here, is that different camera manufacturers had the focusing going to the either left or to the right.
Oh yeah, Canon and Nikon are notorious about
completely
that.
backwards.
Right. So you're used to using one thing.
That's why it feels so weird. I never even thought about that.
But it is. Yeah. I mean, so
Same thing with the mounting of the lenses. It's the exact same way.
Yep.
Completely backwards.
For sure.
Brett, I mean, once we talked about having these finders and screens, but I mean, what about the motor drives for some of these cameras? Because I mean, now we're so used to having digital SLRs that have some type of, you know, motor drive built into them essentially. But the
F3 has a massive motor drive for it. It probably takes enough batteries that you could, you know, jumpstart your car with it when you get back to it.
So what do you mean by a motor drive for anybody who's not familiar?
Okay, a drive would attach to the bottom of the camera. It's basically a built-in advance, so you don't have to constantly crank it after each shot that you take. It automatically advances it. All the digital cameras, all the modern cameras these days actually have built-in drives. So when you fire the button, you can fire up to 6, 7, 8 shots a second. Nikon had I can't remember the model on it right now, but for the F3H or for the F3 series, it would do about 12 frames a second. I mean, you could blow through.
Wow! So in 3 seconds, you'd be through a roll.
Kodak loved it.
Wow!
Well, but also they had the back that held 100 feet of film.
Right.
Yeah, that's
that
right.
had spools on each
I
side.
remember
of
seeing those. I actually did it was a terrible month, but it was an informative month. I did school photography for a minute a few years ago.
Oh, that'd be terrible.
Yeah, it was a little rough, mostly because of showing up. We had to get there before the school buses got to the school and just sit around and wait for the kids to be able to come in. It was some early mornings, and I don't know how people lasted. But it was the company had been around for a while. They were taking us a tour of their facility, and they actually showed us the room where they used to have their darkroom and do their film developing. And the guy had been there for decades, was telling us specifically for those bulk rolls where you'd have like 100 feet at a time, they had a machine that was almost akin to a motion film processor, or motion picture film processor, where they had just giant tanks where they could do those really big bulk rolls at a time.
Amazing.
And there's I can't remember where I saw it, but it was a picture from, they were filming Indiana Jones, not Raiders, Temple of Doom, my least favorite one.
Yeah, through the mine
Dude,
with the.
let's not forget about Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
That's just dead to us. All right.
So you're not even including
that one
that.
doesn't even
it's not even
exist. I don't know
real.
what you're talking about.
All right, that's fair. Continue.
Temple of Doom, where they did, I think it was a Nikon F3. I can't remember the exact model. And they had it had a macro lens on it, and they were doing a stop motion scene, and they were taking a picture, and they had the bulk 35 millimeter back on it. That was so cool. I was totally blown away by seeing something like that. I'd never seen anything like that.
Well, and some of these cameras too, you can, as far as when you get into the professional level and the kind of modular abilities, they made Polaroid backs for some of these cameras.
Yes,
For the Nikon F3, they actually had a Polaroid back for it.
Yeah, so it's the peel apart film that, rest in peace, that we talked about earlier, but like Mark was even saying, you didn't know what you were going to get. So it was really for preview and kind of testing exposure, testing studio lighting, making sure that what you're going to do when you put in your roll film was going to be what you wanted.
Bring it back.
I mean, and some of the, like the Nikon
It's
had
gonna be okay, Bill.
the Nikon had a external battery pack. When people would be photographing in the Arctic or in the cold, they'd have the battery pack
inside your shirt or your jacket
to be able to. And actually, I remember services that would actually change the oil out in your camera, because if you were going someplace where it was going to be real cold, that you had to have a more a thinner.
Like changing out the lubrication in a car.
Changing the viscosity, oil. Wow,
and actually, there's something that's nothing related to that, but I just noticed here that I used a lot in doing medical and scientific photography. Is if you look on some of these cameras, you see this white line, and over here you see a black line, and here's a white line over here. I don't know. They might not have it on some of those, but that actually, was it there?
Yeah, mine on the Minolta, there's one,
over
here?
Yeah, and you know what that is?
No, what is that?
That marks where the film plane is. Yeah. And so if you were doing scientific photography and you had to do something where you had to measure from the film plane to whatever your subject was, that was the way you did it by.
Oh, that's cool.
Like all motion picture cameras usually have a little knob or a line where you would measure the focus.
Exact. Like if you're talking about millimeters or less as far as the distance you need to be able to measure, that's really cool.
That's cool.
Yeah. So Brent, those motor drives we keep talking about, it's kind of akin to a battery grip for a modern SLR camera.
That
it would actually attach on the bottom. But I don't think any of them had like vertical shutter releases on them, did they? Or
no? Well, you had some of them on the grips themselves on the Pro Series. You actually had a place where you had a shutter release on them.
Okay,
so you could flip it vertically and fire it.
Yeah, some of them had two releases, here and here.
Oh yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. I know what you're talking about.
And it's I've got a Nikon F3 in front of me. This is my personal camera. And you're not leading with this, anybody. So this actually has on the front of it, just in case your battery goes dead, because it is a electronic shutter on it. It does give you the ability to fire the camera at a 90th of a second in case your battery goes
that's
dead.
cool. Oh, cool.
So that works out real nice. So it's a nice feature to have, and most of your pro cameras are going to give you some way, shape, or form to fire the camera in case you don't have the battery.
So this is my Nikon geek in me. So what's the big difference between like the F3 and then there was a F3H and then the F3T? Remember?
Okay, so this is the F3 HP. It has the high eye point finder on it. Basically, that allows you 100% viewing of the frame itself. So everything you see in the viewfinder is going to be on the film. The F3, just a standard one, there was a little bit of loss. So when you took a picture, you actually gained a little bit more when you did the processing of it. The F3C is gosh, I'm just completely drawing a blank on that right now.
I'm so disappointed in you.
I know.
Well, then, but then he also made a titanium body.
Is that with the
F3T?
F3T? That's what I thought. Okay.
So the F series, for anybody who is a Nikon file, is the equivalent. It was their top of the line series. It's the equivalent to today's like D1 series. So like the D1, the D4. It's that same kind of made for a pro, made for you're going to be trucking around wherever you can with this camera.
Yeah, and though all these other accessories that might not be as popular with a working professional photographer doing photojournalism. But in my field, in medicine and science, there were all kinds of things that were also accessories that Nikon made. So that's why we bought them, is because we could hook them up to and use them on different types of optical systems or microscopes or whatever. I mean, Nikon gave you that option, and so that's why everybody bought them.
Now, the one thing that I've talked about, like I got started on it. I still shoot Canon in 35 millimeter and digital, and just because it's the system I started on, and I switched to an autofocus 35 millimeter, but I had to get a whole new lens system. That is the one thing that I will always kind of begrudgingly concede to Nikon cameras is the F-mount lens. Yeah. And we even talked about, like I mentioned M-mount lenses on rangefinders and Leicas being compatible, is that there is a great just wealth of lenses available for these cameras. That is a lot of these are backwards compatible going forward to new cameras. So you have things like all of these F-mount lenses can be used on modern DSLRs to varying degrees of compatibility. Some of them, they're still going to be manual focus. Some of them are not going to meter depending on your camera body. If the camera doesn't meter through the lens, you need something that's a higher end camera. Like, typically all the full frame Nikons are going to do that. But also on Nikon 35 millimeter film cameras, you got some ability there too. So you can get older lenses that KEH Camera sells and use them on your newer autofocus film camera.
Or in my case, I bought my Leica 35 millimeter lens in 1983, and I'm using it on my Leica M9P digital camera.
There you go.
It's perfect.
And there's older lenses. Canon and Nikon made M-mount lenses before they came out with their own. And I just want to just geek out for a second. I think Leica is the reason that 35 millimeter became the format that it was. Prior to Leica's, 35 millimeter was just a motion picture film format. The first Leicas coming out are the reason that everything else flowed, and that's become this kind of standard ubiquitous size and style of camera. Stemmed from the first, I want to say it was the Leica 2 and the Leica 3 back.
I mean, when I was in school a long time ago, I mean, the story I heard was, you were talking about motion pictures, that they built a camera that used motion picture film, so that they would do a set, they'd light the set the way they were going to film it, they'd shoot a few frames through this 35 millimeter camera, process it right away, and take a look at it before they'd film it with the 35 millimeter.
I wonder if that's why Ryan Johnson has his Leica around his neck when he's on set.
Quite possibly.
So, I mean, that's how we got, when you think about it, the 35 millimeter frame doesn't enlarge proportionally to a 4x5 print, 5x7, 8x10, 11x. I mean, it's the proportions are different, and everybody says, "Well, why did they ever do that?" Well, that's why you had motion picture film, and then all of a sudden you started having other cameras made, and then the film stock was then being put in these little cassettes and then being used. Okay. And but I mean, in the 30s and 40s and even to the 50s. 35 millimeter was poo-pooed. I mean, it didn't. When there's a reason you see these movies with these guys holding these speed graphics, 4x5s with flashes to do newspaper photography. Because I mean, even when I started in the 70s, I mean, a 35 millimeter was considered amateur. I mean, if you were working for the most part, you weren't gonna sell anything to anybody that was done on 35 millimeter.
Yeah.
It's amazing how much that's changed, because you have newspapers like the Chicago Sun-Times that have just completely ripped out their whole photography department and given their reporters iPhones and say, go at it.
Yeah, for sure.
That's insane.
And also, it was just reminding me, I did that workshop with Kodak motion picture film last month, and it was so cool. They mentioned the fact of like how we ended up with 35 millimeter format to begin with was Thomas Edison, because he was doing motion pictures and figuring this out. And the film that they had the film made for the Brownie at the time, which was basically 70 millimeter film and other larger formats.
Cut it in half.
And he wanted to cut it in half because he wasn't getting enough film. He wasn't going. It was burning through it too quickly on his cameras.
Yeah, he was a slime ball. Pretty much a thief and a liar, and it just all around.
How do you really feel?
I have an immense amount of hatred. No, it's well documented how much he stole. But it is.
But also thanks. We do owe him having a lot of as far as like they showed us an old footage of the old coding room. They had to make this glass custom made to be able to cool the emulsions to do these long rolls of 35 millimeter film because of Thomas Edison.
Yeah, I mean, he did some good things, but no.
Hashtag triggered.
But there were a lot of other people. There are a lot of other people who contributed to motion picture being what it is today. So whenever it gets brought up, I guess that is I am triggered. I just want to note that Thomas Edison was a slime ball. All right, so I'm good.
So I take it you're a fan of Tesla.
Let's not go down. We've already gone too far.
But to that point,
Yeah.
We go to movies now in IMAX and they're in 70 millimeter. Well, that's that same film, and it's like 35 millimeters. It's got perforations on each side to run through the camera. And actually, I think, maybe I'm wrong, Brent, but I mean, Hasselblad made a motor drive for their cameras that use 70 millimeter perforated, with perforations.
Oh
on
yeah,
it.
you can still find for most medium format. Actually, even my camera that I have a Pentax 645N, which doesn't take backs, but it uses inserts.
Right.
They made a 70 millimeter insert for that camera too, which was the equivalent of those 100-foot rolls shooting something a ton of studio photography or shooting kids' portraits for schools. You don't want to be changing film all the time. I almost bought, somebody was selling a roll of 3200 T-Max and 70 millimeter. Like I almost bought it on eBay. Yeah. I mean, at this point you'd have to cut it down into individual and maybe roll it yourself. But you can still find backs made for most of those cameras and they go dirt cheap.
We have
KEH
that kind of stuff.
Camera sells them. I've seen them on your website before, so I imagine you don't get a lot of demand for those.
No, we don't, and that's why they're so cheap. And that's the same thing. You can say the same about 220.
Yeah, which that's a shame because that only recently went away. But it's not. It's just it was more than double the cost for it, and you can get a bunch of 120 backs or inserts for a lot less than paying for 220 film.
You got that right. Yeah.
And it's also a manufacturing issue too for the makers.
And then you're talking about 35, only existing because of Leica. Well, I mean, the whole, I guess, sort of similar to 110 only existing because we got all this 16 millimeter film. What are we gonna do with it?
Exactly.
I'll make a 110 camera. Great. We'll change the perforations and sell it. And
Those I'll give you about a B+ on your old timey voice.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying.
Okay, no, it's okay.
Yeah.
For a 22-year-old, you got a beard going. It's Jeez, I'm 11 years older than you, man. That's anyway. So
I want to throw in one more camera.
For sure, please.
We're talking about rangefinders.
Yes, I'm excited about this guy.
And this is I think it's a very rare camera in the sense that this is a Honeywell Vistronic 915. And I can...
Who said who to what now?
What?
Who said who to what now?
I can venture to guess that no one's heard of it or seen it or used it. Because what it was a collaboration between Honeywell when they were making cameras and Leica to make essentially a knockoff of a Leica M series rangefinder camera, much smaller. If you look at this, I mean, it's even much smaller than the Leica CL. And they made 10 of these, and I started working at KEH in July, and you got this in, didn't you, Brent?
I did. We actually had a in-house buying event, and I had owner of a local camera store come in, and he's told me about these cameras before. This is the first time he's ever brought one in, and he actually worked for Honeywell Pentax some way. I can't honestly remember the whole story.
He was a regional manager.
He was pretty high up in the chain, and they basically came out with this camera, and as soon as they came out with it, they basically said, "No, sorry, we're selling Honeywell." So the camera. It's a one-off for the most part. So
they made 10 pre-production models.
So this is one of 10 of these cameras that has ever existed.
And we have 4 of them at KEH.
So what do these cameras go for?
I don't know yet.
That's we're working on that.
Though I did use this one,
Really?
and I did at one of my workshops. And the next blog post I'm doing for KEH will be about this camera and include some of the images.
Oh, that's fantastic.
I did using black and
I'm
white.
excited
Ilford
to see
400 black and white.
So where is that? You go to KEH.com and then just the blog, or where can somebody find that?
We have the blog, and you can sign up for the blog on our website also. So
Okay.
I mean, I encourage people to do that to receive the blog, and I'll be doing probably every couple weeks at the start different posts on different things.
Yeah, so when you hit our website, if you go to the top right, I believe it says join our click.
Okay.
Just sign up there, and you can choose what do you want to hear about, how you want to hear about it, how often you want to hear about it. It gives you a lot of good information.
So I'll just pose a question to the table here, which something that I personally, well, I'll just ask the question. I had numerous people in the past few years, and it was kind of prior to the big film resurgence that we're experiencing now, but saying that 35 millimeter as a format was dead. They could still see shooting large format, medium format, but 35 millimeter had become obsolete now because of digital. What do you guys feel about that?
I'll be honest with you. I'm incredibly excited with what I'm seeing in the industry with around 35 millimeter. I feel like it's really starting to have a pretty good comeback.
Well, I mean, for us as a company, 30% of our business that you buy and we sell are film cameras.
Right.
I mean, when you tell people that, they think they can't even believe it, but we do. So, I mean, if you're out here listening to this and you've got stuff you want to get rid of, we're more than happy to buy it, bring it to us.
That is KEH.com.
But really, I mean, or if, these cameras we just showed here, I mean, if you're a student or you want to start experimenting with 35 millimeter photography, it doesn't take, that big of an investment to get a quality camera.
And I was also going to mention at the same time, there are certain Nikon cameras and Canon cameras where if you already got the glass, you can purchase like the F100 will work with the AFS system, the F100.
It's a little bit more difficult on the Canon side. The Nikon's a little bit easier to work with because Canon completely had to change their mount when they got away from manual focus.
But if you are shooting, if you have EF lenses, Canon autofocus lenses, not EFS. Those are made for the crop frame digital cameras like the 70D, the 60D, the Rebels. But if you have Canon EF lenses, they are almost all compatible with the EOS film bodies. So if you're looking at KEH's website, KEH Camera's website, excuse me, you go on there, you look for an EOS film body, you can find a steal on some of these cameras. Like the Canon Elan 2 is one that I always recommend to people because it's under $100 for that camera easily. You have controls for shutter speed and aperture right there in the camera body. It's a fantastic camera for the price. A Canon A2E, a Canon EOS 3, a Canon EOS 1 of all those different variations.
Yeah,
you can tell that I shoot Canon. Yeah. But, all of those cameras are compatible. If you're a pro shooter, you've got a 50 millimeter 1.2 L lens, buy a $100 camera and put it on there and shoot film. You're going to get that incredibly swirly bokeh on it. You're going to get that beautiful look with that expensive lens, but you don't have to buy another $5,000 camera body. You can start shooting film tomorrow using the lenses that you love.
Yeah, that's one of the things I did in film school. Actually, all my buddies had a bunch of L glass, and I was like, forget that. So I actually went and I got a great deal from you guys on a 1N, and I got the motor drive with it, and I was like, oh, I'm feeling so fancy. And I just I didn't buy a single lens because all my friends, I was like, hey man, so this weekend, what are you doing with that 16 to 35? Oh hey, you're 85-1.2, so can I borrow that? And that's exactly what I did. I went and shot a bunch of modern L glass on 35. And
I use a Sigma 35 1.4 art lens on my EOS film bodies.
Oh my gosh,
that's such a good lens. It's so good. I love that lens. It performs fantastic.
The very exciting part about this is that even if you have some old glass at home and you have a modern camera, nothing to put it on, there are adapters out there that you can get and adapt the lens over. And the old glass will give you a different look than what the modern glass does, just because of grinding methods, what went into
different
making
coatings on there and stuff. Yeah,
European glass is different than Japanese glass.
Absolutely.
I mean, when I got my Canon 5D Mark II, I took my Leica R lenses.
Oh, cool.
And used the adapter and put them on that because I only had one lens with my Canon digital camera, and I used, I had 4 or 5 Leica R lenses, and I just did that. It was obviously manual focus and manual exposure, but the images were, we talked about it being a box that moved film. This was a box that had a digital sensor in it, and I could put a different lens on. I think the bottom line here is if you look at all this stuff, you can get into 35 millimeter film photography for, what you pay for probably 1 month's cell phone bill or cable bill. I mean, it's not that, we're not talking about thousands of dollars.
Yep.
We're talking about a couple $100. I mean, we go through it as a company and tech it so that, as we talked about the last time, I mean, our different grades are really what the outside of the camera looks like, not the functionality of it. Right. And you got a 6-month warranty with it. So, I mean,
that is something that I think all of us wanting new 35 millimeter cameras. Bill, you mentioned something. I posed a question, I think, in the film photographers group. What would you want for a new camera? And you said a warranty, because we're all getting these things secondhand now. But if you're purchasing through a reputable broker such as KEH Camera, which I think is our best option far and away here in North America, absolutely, you're getting a warranty with that.
Well, I mean, we Brent has these prices on this, and the SRT 201 with a it was what, $200 for the body, or $100 for the body and the lens, and you got a 6-month warranty on it.
Yep.
And
I mean, where are you gonna find that?
You're not.
Yeah, and I do think it's important to know. It's like, $100. How good is this image? Well, there's varying quality of glass, but for the most part, my students are like, oh, this dumb K1000. What is this going to do? I'm like, some really great images you can make.
Right.
And it's
right. You're not going to. You don't always have to equate price with quality. And when you're talking about film cameras in this era, I mean. Yeah, we talked about the F3 having all these accessories, but did it give you a sharp? You're using the same lens on that F3 as you'd use on this Nikon FM.
Mm-hmm. I'm actually using a very cheap lens on this F3. It's the E series lens, which was designed to be less expensive, smaller for the Nikon EM. So,
well, even then, I mean, the quality of the glass back then, like even on their 50 millimeter 1.8s that they have, are still phenomenal. Even today, the cheap plastic 50 millimeter 1.8 AFSGs are still great.
They're beautiful
lenses that really anybody that is shooting and wants to transition into a different lens. The 50 millimeter is like the one that you have to go to. I mean, that's why they call it the nifty 50 for so long. I mean, pretty much all of these on here have a 50 millimeter on there.
Well, because that's what when you bought the camera, that's what they came with.
Yeah,
I mean, you really didn't.
Yeah.
I mean, I think maybe the F3s, didn't come with a lens. I don't know. I can't remember.
Actually, none of these cameras came with a lens. That was all pretty much a la carte. So you could really add what you wanted to it. But you typically got the 50 because that was the least expensive one, just because of production cost. They produce so many of them, so you can get them pretty cheaply.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in the sort of the philosophy was the 50 millimeter was, quote, a normal lens for 35 millimeter because it equated to an average normal field of view. I've worked in ophthalmology all my life. For me, my normal field of view is really 35 millimeter. Mm-hmm. That's why that's what I had on my. So when I'm walking around, if I sat here and saw you three guys across from me, I knew I could pick up my camera, and the image I was going to make with that 35 millimeter lens was exactly what I saw here. That's cool. So that worked for me, and that's what I did. But other people, their normal vision might be 50 millimeters, or it might be 28 millimeters. And so, I mean, that's in terms of what we pick and what we choose. It's not what some camera company tells us is normal. It's what's normal for us. And the bottom line with all of this stuff is, the quality of the image you're going to get has to do with your eyes and your brain and your heart, and putting those things together about what you're photographing, not what piece of glass you have or what box you have moving the film.
And I think, Mark, you touched on it beautifully earlier about how talking about so many people will get something like they'll spend the money and buy like a beautiful M6 and a wonderful like Noctilux 50 and, spend thousands of dollars on a Leica setup, but then sell it 6 months later because they didn't take the time to actually learn it.
Yep.
And that's why things like Kevin's Pentax or this Minolta for Bill or that Olympus you carry around with you, Brent, is you get great images, or you're like an M4 because you know the camera, because it becomes second nature. It's everything you were saying, camera. You're getting, or about the cameras, Kevin, is that you are getting the machine out of the way. Yeah, it's just becoming an extension of you in second nature.
Well, and I think that also part of that, and whether we're talking about these cameras or the new DSLRs or the mirrorless cameras, is that people always say to me, well, Mark, what camera should I get? What's the best camera? Well, we all know that there's no best camera, but the one thing you do have to do, and I don't care if it's a film camera from back here or a DSLR is actually pick it up, hold it, and see how it see how. I mean, I was working with somebody today, teaching them some photography with the new Sony. What model was that I was using?
The A9?
A7R2.
Yeah.
I mean, and every time I picked it up to use it, my fingers went to the wrong place. On that, where I would normally go, it wasn't where the controls were. But so, I mean, that's what we have to look at. They're all in different places, and you talked about it being an extent. These tools start becoming a vehicle for us saying something when we get the technical part out of the way, that it becomes invisible, and all we're doing is making images, whatever camera it is. I mean, for me, that's what I love about working for KEH Camera, is that we sell everything. It doesn't have to be this or that. Yeah. It's how do we find the right tool for our customers to do the work that they want to do.
Yeah. So if someone is wanting to, I know, Bill, we're running short on time here, and I appreciate anybody who's stuck with us. I know this has run a little long. It's a really rich subject matter as far as 35 millimeter cameras. If there's someone who has no idea where to start, can they call you guys to actually get some advice on that?
Certainly. We have a number of salespeople that are on call or on the phones Monday through Saturday. So if you have any questions, you're really kind of wondering, what's going to be your best fit. These guys have been in the business for years. They know what they're talking about. You just kind of tell them and help them out. I mean, you want to have some idea of what type of photography you want to do, and they can kind of direct you in the right area.
And my email address is mmAIO@keh.com. So I'd be happy for any listener who had some questions to.
One thing we mentioned is we do have a 6-month warranty on everything we sell. On top of that, you also have a 14-day no hassle return period. So it gives you the opportunity to say, all right, is this going to be the right camera for me? Is it everything working in the right place? Does it feel comfortable in my hand? So it gives you an opportunity to try it out.
So even if you didn't even like it, there's still nothing wrong with it whatsoever if it just didn't work out. And
that's correct.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, one great thing about being here in the Atlanta area, and I actually live like 5-10 minutes from
I'm in Smyrna too.
Yeah.
We're like right down
5 minutes away. Is being able to I can purchase online. When I've bought several film backs from my RZ. I just keep collecting more and more. I'll never stop. But being able to go and buy a piece of equipment, pick it up, at the location, and fiddling with it, and right then, if it wasn't right, just say, okay, I need to swap this out or return this. And I think that's super convenient for that's not everyone, but someone in the Atlanta area. I highly recommend doing that because you can get your camera very quickly. I mean, I've gotten things same day.
Yeah, if you order it from us and you're in the Atlanta area, we'll have it in about an hour for you. We have to go through all the credit cards go through a credit check, and it's something that's not under our control, but it has to be verified.
So the amazing part is that all the cameras that we have on this table here are super affordable. You can get into one of these Minoltas for less than $100. But what's even more amazing is that you can actually get into it a little bit cheaper because Brent actually has a promo code for us. Woohoo!
This will give you 10% off of any film camera. That's body, lens, accessories. So you can get filters, you name it, along with it. So the promo code for this is going to be C41-film, FILM 0917. And that promo code is going to be good until the end of this month, which is September.
Cool. Is that any format or is that the 35?
Any 35 only.
Only 35 millimeter.
Now, at the same time, if you go back and listen to the other podcasts, we still have the other coupon codes that are going through September. So that'll be on medium format and large format. So it's a good reason to go back and listen.
Yeah, you can go back and listen to it and hear us ramble for another hour for each of those episodes. No, they're really great. I mean, they're jam-packed with information. We all had really fun. It's really sad to see you guys go after this.
Yeah, for real. I feel like there's got to be some other maybe after your busy season, we can bring you guys back in for maybe a road trip recap, right? I think everybody would love to hear about like your stories from the road, something else you'd have kind of encountered along the way, or
that'd be pretty interesting.
And once you figure out the price on that Honeywell, we'll announce it. If anything,
it'll probably be within the next week or so because I've got to finish the blog, and then once it's before I post it, we'll finish the pricing and it'll be on the website.
You let me know and I'll pull out a second mortgage on my house.
Actually, I don't think it's going to be that bad, but it is a unique camera.
Do we get any spoilers? Did our listeners get any hints on a prize?
Oh no, I'm
Okay.
not. The last thing I do is price anything.
Okay.
We have experts in our company who do that. So
Okay, well, you know,
no, they do. I mean, they know. I mean, the hard part about this is there's only 10 of them made.
Yeah. So there's nothing.
There's not a
parodies.
history
Yeah.
on it. So it could be, somebody can want it real bad.
Yeah. I guess it's a collectible like that is worth what someone's willing to pay for it.
And I think 3 of them are in the box.
Whoa.
This is the only one that
What?
isn't.
What year did they do that? Do you know off the top of your head?
I don't. I don't know. I want to say it's like a late 70s, early 80s.
Yeah, there's
That's so cool.
While we were talking here, I was trying to do a Google search on it, and there's nothing.
Oh,
on
no, there is nothing.
Nothing.
There's actually one of these that was on eBay. So we said there were 10 of them. So the guy, actually his name's Joe O'Connor. He actually owned a camera store in Sandy Springs. He actually sold one to a guy in California, and that guy's had it listed on eBay. So it pops up every now and then it goes away, then it comes back up. So there's still one floating around out there.
Interesting.
Dang.
Well, cool. Well, so there's one last promo code on here. It's more of a link. It's the Photo Plus Expo code. I put that in the description in the podcast and on YouTube. So check that out if you guys are in the New York area in the end of October.
End of October,
Yep.
27th,
Yeah.
8th, and 9th.
KEH Camera will be there on the trade show floor. Yes.
Okay, awesome.
Kodak is there, and they're also giving away black and white film. I know Steven camps out there, usually at Imaging.
Oh yeah, for sure. That's usually at Imaging. Like Tim Ryugo and those guys will probably get sick of me, but that is actually something that's been cool, especially this past year to see them coming up and saying, "Oh hey Kodak, I've got an old Nikon F2," and like Tim's like, "Oh well, here's some Tri-X, go shoot that."
And it's
so cool.
It doesn't hurt that they're offering coffee also, but I'm just curious. What do you think the chances are that maybe they're going to introduce Ektachrome at that? It's fourth quarter.
Ooh, I'll be waiting with bated breath for sure. I would love to see that happen. And actually, I know they've been more active on social media talking about, like Bill said, getting these kind of promo rolls out and stuff. So that would be fantastic. When's CES coming out? That's
usually January.
February.
yeah, because I know it was right before Imaging this past year.
Right.
So if it doesn't happen for Photo Plus, I would be very surprised if it didn't happen for CES.
Yeah, because that's when they announced the 8mm camera. So I would imagine it'd probably be somewhere in there.
But if it's there, you guys please plaster that all over social media. I'm not going to make it to New York for this, but I want to see, just post that everywhere.
We'll have Mark give some updates.
Okay, please do.
Cool. All right, guys. Well, Brent, Mark, thank you guys again for coming out. This was such an awesome idea that we came together. Again, guys, KEH, we did not pay them. They did not pay us for this. This was something that we totally thought this would be a really cool idea to do. And I can't believe we're done with all 3 episodes. So hopefully you guys learned something out of it. Please comment. If you have any questions on for us, if you have any ideas for what we should talk about,
Future
or if we
shows,
have-
future
yeah,
guests.
absolutely.
If you have one of these 10 Honeywell cameras sitting around,
There's only 4 more out there.
there's only 4 more out there. So if you're one of the 4, I think KEH wants to hear from you.
All right, guys. Well, thanks again for coming out, and we will be doing our regular scheduled shows every 2 weeks. At least we try to do that. So we do have some other interviews that are coming down the wire. So a lot of really exciting stuff for Studio C41. So stick around, and we'll see you guys on the next episode. See ya.